New Testament at the Howard University School of Divinity and in one of the participating faculty members for the Science for Seminaries project. This afternoon we have two workshops which deal with outreach programs. And the first one is the outreach programs in churches and faith-based organizations. And we have as our presenter Audrey D. Daniel from Alpha and Omega Church Services Incorporated. And she holds a BA in biology from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and a Master of Divinity from Howard University School of Divinity. In 1991, she became the first woman to be ordained at the 130-plus year history of Berean Baptist Church in Northwest Washington. Pastored by another of our graduates, Robert Child. And she served as youth minister at Berean. And later at Mount Ephraim Baptist Church in Upper Marlboro, she served as an associate minister and leader of the women's ministry. At Mount Ephraim, she was the first woman preacher at the church who shared the pulpit with male clergy and administered baptisms. For over 5 years, she was the national director of the National Office on Philanthropy and the Black Church Program at the Council on Foundations in Washington, D.C. Reverend Daniel was also a program associate for the Directorate for Education and Human Resources per programs of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And the work of the Directorate included programs in science education, activities for underrepresented groups, and promoting the public understanding of science and technology. She currently serves as an associate minister at the First Baptist Church of Glenarden in Glenarden, Maryland. So, Reverend Daniel, you bring a great deal of experience and expertise, and she will be speaking on hands-on science and mathematics, engineering enrichment. HUSD? Very good. Share with us.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to thank Dr. Ware for the opportunity to spend some time with colleagues here in this new building. It's beautiful, and thank you, Dr. Newhart, for the introduction, and to Sylvia, Reverend Dr. Sylvia McDonald Hoffman. I just gave her my little logo for hands-on math and science, and I said, "Oh, this is a masterpiece. Can I buy it?" With the painting. So she's going to help me today as I talk to you. And during this workshop session, it's designed to assist churches and church leaders with programs in church and community to give tips on how to integrate, how to incorporate hands-on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics into their educational outreach programs. Today's agenda shows that we're going to talk about integration of science in church faith-based early learning programs. We're going to present best practices, and we're going to simulate a sample learning experience for children, and we'll then later have a conversation. Okay, what is HUSD? Well, as Dr. Newhart just mentioned, I had a little brief experience at the AAAS, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, where I had an opportunity to actually do a little bit of math and science. Also growing up in North Carolina, Wilmington, North Carolina, spent some times in some little ditches and little ponds and puddles, and I like looking at those salamanders and all of those little trees, and I enjoyed just the environment pretty much. And so I love science. So then I decided to study biology. And because of that, while I was at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, we were part of a black student union there, and they suggested that we go out and do some outreach into the community, and we did some tutoring and after-school programs. They made sure they made us stay involved into the community. We caught buses, and we became student interns, and we went out into the community, and we did after-school programs, and we helped kids with their homework and everything. And so as a result of that, just to tell you a little bit about that, that's how hands-on science and mathematics, engineering, enrichment has come to fruition for me. It's a way to help young people become more interested in math and science. And it was organized in connection with the church communities, with their educational programs that are already sustained and already in existence. It's operated by churches, that it connects with churches that operate educational programs in community. They have preschool, daycare programs, after-school programs, Saturday tutorial programs, field trips. They have summer camps, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, career days, college entrance workshops, mentoring programs, GED preparations, and other activities. And as a result of that, this is how hands-on science and mathematics, engineering, enrichment came into existence. It connects with organizations that's already established, already organized, already have programs in place, and pretty much you just come in and connect with the leaders of the organization and ask them pretty much, would you like to incorporate math and science into your programs? Now, hands-on science and mathematics, engineering, enrichment programs. Where are they located? Well, this is a little bit of my journey in doing hands-on science and mathematics, engineering, enrichment programs. Maple Springs Baptist Church Youth Ministry in Capitol Heights, Maryland. Just keep it there. I'll just tell a little bit about, yeah, okay. Well, just, you can go back to the map. Yeah, so, is it back on the screen? No. Thank you. So, pretty much from northeast to California, you see Texas and the Bahamas, Jamaica, London, England. We've connected with church sites across the country. As I said, how do I connect? I connect with organizations. For example, the New England Baptist Convention actually is coming to town this month, I think at Berean this month, at the end of the month. And they encompass about 12 states in the New England area. And so I trained those sites from 1998 through 2008, and then they go back to their churches and they incorporate the hands-on math and science activities similar to some of what we will do today. Okay, hands-on science. Okay, hands-on science and mathematics, engineering, enrichment models are located. We're given just a few because you saw the little dots across the map, and the Bahamas, Jamaica, and New England, London, England. But we're just going to give you 4 models today that have been very successful since 1999, a very independent, collaborative study on developing and incorporating, infusing math and science into after-school programs in faith-based organizations. Maple Springs Baptist Church Youth Ministry in Capitol Heights, Maryland, received funding from President George W. Bush's Faith Initiative funds, and they asked us to come to the table. Partners, Mount Ephraim, yes, thank you. National, that's Maple Springs, or, yeah, there we go. They received funds from President George W. Bush's Faith Initiative, and from 2003 to 2009, we infused or integrated math and science into their summer camp. And we did it from 2003 to 2009. And interestingly enough, what I loved about that model is that it was a summer camp program they were doing all the time. They just came to the table and said, hey, we're going to write a proposal and let's add some math together, and then your role, we know you do hands-on math and science, so your role will be to do the hands-on math and science activities for our summer camp. I said, okay. What I loved about this group is that it was a collaborative effort with Mount Ephraim Baptist Church in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, Faith Baptist Church. We sat in a boardroom and they decided who would do which role in the proposal. And Mount Ephraim's role was to do the math science piece. We have extra supporters: Chick-fil-A, Staples Foundation for Learning, Advisory Committee, parents, family, Howard University School of Medicine. I've come to Howard School of Medicine to ask some of the professors, can I use some of those bones or, skeletons? And I've come in and out, asking them for body parts. They have those structures. They have body models, and the kids love that at the math and science activities because it's a hands-on. They can touch the lungs. They can pull it out. They know where their lungs are now in their body. They know where the heart's located. They know where their stomach is. They can see the esophagus. And so that's been the beauty of connecting with Howard University School of Divinity as well as Prince George's Community College. And of course, AAAS. Working with AAAS, they sent me a whole box of materials that they were not using, and we used those materials, whatever was left in that room at the Director for Education and Human Resources, we used those materials for this activity. So they were a major supporter for those hands-on activities, yes. Okay, now the outcomes, we also partnered with National Christian Academy in Oxon Hill, Maryland. We created a science department. While working with that principal at the school, the principal decided, he called me into his office, he says, I'm a mathematician, I'd like to strengthen science and math in the school. I said, sure, I love doing that. And I was introduced to him by the young lady that I helped pull off the President George W. Bush's Faith Initiative program at Maple Springs. And so her son was in the summer camp, for example, and so she said, could you come over and help us pull off some science and math, hands-on science and math over here? I said, sure. After that summer, the principal decided he wanted me to partner with him, and I partnered with him from 2009 to 2015, creating a science department. They taught science, and then they decided to strengthen their science department at National Christian Academy. And now they had a chair of the Department of Science. They instituted an annual science fair. The pastor at the church, Pastor Lowry, and his wife, who created National Christian Academy, they were the judges of the science fair. They asked me to be a judge. I was so honored that they asked me to be a judge at their first science fair that they've ever had, and the principal of the school. As a result of that, I said, wow, you guys are really serious. I decided to partner with groups that were really serious about making things happen as it relates to hands-on science and mathematics, engineering, enrichment. So I went to National Science Foundation in Virginia, and we took one of the science teachers, a biology teacher, to National Science Foundation. They met with them, and they said, oh, by the way, Prince George's Community College has a STEM department. I said, really? That's down the street from me. I didn't know that Prince George's Community College had a Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics division. So the National Science Foundation says to me, yes, so I want you to go over there and I want to introduce yourself. So I went over to Prince George's Community College and I introduced myself to the dean of the STEM division. It took us 2 years, but finally they created a field trip day specifically for this school, National Christian Academy. They weren't sure if they wanted to do it, but they had twice K2-year-olds to 12th graders showed up at Prince George's Community College for a field trip day there. Smithsonian Air and Space Museum is also a place they've gone out on field trips. And the Kennedy Center, they have special programs in the summer. And then I think 2 summers ago, the Kennedy Center had something like hip-hop science or something. And so everything that was related to math and science, The teachers were in on it, and they loved it. They were really in on it, and it was successful because the leader, the principal, was a mathematician, and he said, I want to strengthen math and science, so we made that happen. And Chick-fil-A was an excellent supporter. Every time I talk about science or walk into the room, if you guys decide to do this program, the kids at National Christian Academy, I could not come into the class without a Chick-fil-A bag. You know, it's like science, they connect Chick-fil-A to science. I just happened to bring a big, large, nuggets tray in one day, and I was like, nutrition, this connects to science. And they were like, every day it was almost as if, okay, we can't hear you until we see some Chick-fil-A. So that was the fun part about it. So if you're going to do something like summer enrichment, or you're incorporating and integrating enrichment, hands-on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, it's always the F-U-N, fun, fun, fun. Everybody say that. Fun, fun, fun. And that's what the kids love about it. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sylvia. All right, so the Thursday schedule, I showed this to Dr. Ware, and he said, I think that would be a good thing for the group to see today, what the schedules look like. For the K3 to K4, the directors of the summer camp, they did such a wonderful job. They were so familiar with the children that they knew exactly where to position science in the day for K3-year-olds, for 3-year-olds. They knew where to position science in for the K4-year-olds so they could get the maximum out of their time and energy for math and science. So you had lunch, for example, Spanish, etiquette, science for K3-year-olds, and then in K4 you had arts and crafts, lunch, science, nap, snack, story, and then I think there's another one. Thanks, Sylvia. And then for first grade, they had dance, arts and crafts, dance, lunch, arts and crafts, and at 2:30 to 3:20 it seemed to be a feasible time for the first graders. For fourth graders, they thought 1:30 to 2:20 p.m. was a better time during a 6 a.m. to a 6 p.m. Summer camp day. Now, the learning style. Learning takes place by the students carrying out physical activities rather than listening to a lecture or watching demonstrations. And there's a heavy emphasis on the hands-on experience. And like I said, National Christian Academy had a strong summer and still has a strong summer camp program. That principal decided he also wanted to integrate hands-on in the school year. So for example, he said, okay, now the parents are loving this math and science, hands-on science and mathematics engineering in the summer camp. Now what we want to do is we want to just bring it on into the school program. So right after school, they had an after-school program, and we were able to engage the senses, sight, sound, smell, and touch on what they learned during the school day. So if they were working on, plants, or they were talking about the solar system, I came in with glowing balls that lit up, and I said, planet Earth is where we live, and it said, let's learn the solar system. So through sight, sound, smell, and touch, at the end of the day, during the school year, they were able to just have fun and learn more through hands-on science and mathematics, engineering, enrichment. It creates fun and memorable experiences for children. Everybody, you say fun, fun, fun. Fun, fun, fun. When I walk through the door, Dr. Newhart, when I walk through the door at the schools, the kids are like, oh, there she is. You're like, Chick-fil-A? Because Chick-fil-A also gave out, excuse me, Dr. Newhart, but Chick-fil-A gave me at the end of the session, if they completed every session, they received a Chick-fil-A, if I still have it here, they received a Chick-fil-A certificate. And on the end of the Chick-fil-A certificate, they were able to go and get a free sandwich or free kids meal. So, here it is. So I told Chick-fil-A that I was known as the Chick-fil-A lady. So they got certificates, and at the end of the summer camp, they were able to, a certificate of achievement to do because they participated in hands-on math and science. Okay, pass that around. Also, it's non-controversial. It introduces science without theological debates. Now, like I told you, I grew up in North Carolina, and I was a real country girl and walked around all the time, and wherever puddles were, after a downpour, I would go and look at those puddles because I discovered, as Dr. Dominic was talking about, those creatures coming up out of the water with legs. As soon as I heard him say that, I thought about, oh, those tadpoles I used to watch. You know, after a big rain and a puddle was still there, there was a little ditch, I'd go over there and I'd see, you know, I would see the tadpole process. I could see the cycle. I love that. I would bring my own little basket and I'd pick up some salamanders and I'd pick up some tadpoles and I would watch those cycles. So that's you know, that's life. Science is all around us. And so just like Chick-fil-A was science to those kids. Hey, you know, they know how to put those nuggets in some oil and cook them. Bring those nuggets to class. Okay, now also being a non-controversial and it introduces science without theological debates, it's also a creative way to introduce young people to science as they understand God's world. Now at National Christian Academy, they already have a university from Florida who produces, I think, Becca books or something like that, and it says Observing God's World. So they learn science through, it's integrated with that, so that's just really fun. Now, hands-on activities that we're going to do today would be 3 activities that Dr. Ware and I talked about that would be fun for you guys. Tangram pieces, I want more red M&Ms, and let's talk temperature. So, as we move forward, we are going to pass out, I think the first one we're going to do is tangrams. And how many people have done tangrams before? Raise your hand if you've done that. Okay, good. And tangrams is an ancient Chinese puzzle, and the kids love it, and just even for K2-year-olds, you don't have to get really deep into the geometry and the algebra and all of that. It's just tangrams. Everybody say tangrams. Tangrams. Say tangrams. Tangrams. Now this is how I teach my class. I say tangrams one more time. Tangrams. Okay, say T-A-N. T-A-N. G-R-A. G-R-A. M-S. M-S. Say tangrams. Tangrams. Say ancient Chinese puzzle. Ancient Chinese puzzle. All right, so tangrams is an ancient Chinese puzzle. And so what we've done here is, at the end of the day, you get to take home tangrams, your own sheet, but we've also pre-cut some tangrams for you today. So because we're a nice, small, intimate group, I'm going to ask you to come out. Do you want to come up or you want to pass out the tangrams for them? Okay. So Dr. Sylvia Kaufman is passing out the tangrams, and I don't know if you want to pass that out after we do it. Yeah, now. Okay. Okay, good. And Dr. Newhart's going to pass out your sheet that you need to use. We did pre-cut already for you, so we wouldn't have to have you cut out your own sheet, but you can use this as a template if you're working with young people. Now, once everybody gets the tangrams, we just want to make sure that you count your pieces in the bag, okay? This is the fun part about AAAS, right? You guys know that, right, about AAAS? You don't know this part about it? What? You stop that. No. Didn't get the tag. All right, this is AAAS. Actually, they sent me tangrams. When I say AAAS, they had lots of hard tangrams left, and they sent me a lot of information. A big box of materials from AAAS came so I could be successful with President Bush's Faith Initiative funds. Okay, once you get your tangrams, I'd like for you to actually open your bag. And I'm sorry, I did not bring Chick-fil-A with me today, guys. It's my class. Yes. So that's a tip. Bring Chick-fil-A with you. If you use this in any program that you have at your church. And as I said, Dr. Newhart's passing out the template that you can use. Make copies from this, keep this as an original, and then you call it out. It's on cardstock, poster board, and we teach spatial relationships. Now, the next thing I'd like for you to do is to open your bag and count the pieces in there. Count the pieces. How many pieces do you have in your bag? Thank you.
6, 7, 8.
You have how many pieces?
7.
7 pieces. That's good. Now, for K2 and K3-year-olds, instead of bringing up the strong geometry behind it and the angles and all of that, you can say 7, and let's count to 7. So we count from 1 to 7 with the young kids, and they love it. They love their tangrams, and when they leave the class, they're marching down the halls, and they're singing tangrams, ancient Chinese puzzle, and then they're counting to 10. So it's just a fun way to get kids really excited and really learning what they're being exposed to during the day in the classroom.
Public schools. And our session speaker is the Reverend Hazel Cherry from the Expectations Project. Yay! Brought her own fan club. So, anyway, she's a native of Oakland, California. She's a Christian minister, creative writer, and community organizer. She earned a BA degree in pastoral studies from Patton University in Oakland and a Master of Divinity from Howard University School of Divinity, where she was my advisor. Her interests lie at the intersections of religion, sexuality, Black feminist theory, and Black popular culture. Currently, she works as a faith community organizer for the Expectations Project, a non-profit organization that empowers people of faith to work for the eradication of inequality in education through prayer, compassionate service, and faithful advocacy. With the Expectations Project, her primary role is to train, equip, and mobilize faith leaders to become advocates for quality education for all children in the District of Columbia. So Hazel, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
How are we feeling? We just had lunch, just did some activities. How's everybody feeling at the moment?
Fun.
Good. Okay. You feel like nap time almost? I would like to thank Dr. Ware for having me here with you all this afternoon. It's just a pleasure to be back at Howard University amongst my colleagues and all of my faculty who have helped me matriculate and are still advising me hereafter. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity. As Dr. Newhart said, I currently work for an organization called the Expectations Project, where we do advocacy, championing quality public education here in the district. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, it'll come up in a minute, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself, but we're going to talk a little bit about STEM programs and the disparities here in the district, particularly with children of color in the areas of math and science, and how faith communities can play a role in supplementing that. I think Reverend Daniels gave us some great concrete examples of what some of that can look like on the ground, but I'm just going to do some more overviewing of what other examples could be and look like, and then talk about the reason why I think it's important for religion and science to continually be in conversation and how that in turn will affect public education. So who am I? I'm a native of Oakland, California. I moved to Washington, D.C. to attend Howard Divinity School, and as of now, I'm going to stay in the D.C. area. I haven't quite gotten used to the cold, but I'm here for now. And so I've always had a passion for working with children and youth. I spent some time as a youth director for a church back home, did some work here with a professor we know, Dr. Harding, and his church and youth ministry. So I always find myself in these spaces where we can empower children and kids and youth to be their best selves. So I find myself at Expectations Project doing that similar kind of work, but on an advocacy level, not so much direct service. Dr. Newhart did a good job as well explaining what the Expectations Project does. We work specifically with faith communities because we believe that faith communities can be catalysts of social change on the ground and at the political and advocacy literacy level. And we do that through two tenets, what we call compassionate service and faithful advocacy. Now, compassionate services is sort of what Reverend Daniels talked about, the programming that is happening within the local churches, within denominations where they're directly impacting kids through programming. Faithful advocacy is where we look at the policies that are in place that affect public education programs. Right now, one of our latest pushes is to advocate for trauma-informed approaches to learning, which means that if you look at Ward 7 and 8 here in the district where there's crime and there's violence and there's poverty and even homelessness, these in turn affect children in traumatizing ways, and that also affects how they will or will not produce in the classroom. And so we're advocating for teachers and administrators to be trained on how to interact with students who have been affected by all sorts of trauma. And if you want to talk to me about more of that, feel free to see me after. I'm always looking to connect with persons within the faith community. So these are our objectives for today. We're going to be looking at STEM again on the ground and how some of the programs are happening here in the district. We're going to talk about science and religious education. And when I say religious education, I mean specifically like Christian education within churches, how we can see sort of some of that connect and collaborate on the ground. The power of exploration is what I'm calling it, and we'll talk about it more. We're going to talk about some points of intersection and then how we as people of faith can take action on the ground. So I want to start off with a brief discussion about what sorts of thoughts and feelings arise when you hear the terms religion and science being said. Conflict, okay. What else?
Evolution.
Okay. Anybody else? We've been talking about it a lot, so I know you all have some thoughts. Just for me. Ecology, good. Okay. What else?
Collaboration.
Say it again.
Collaboration.
Collaboration, awesome. Okay.
Misinformation.
Say it again. Misinformation, good. How many of us? Oh, somebody else. I heard a male one.
The Big Bang Theory?
Okay. How many of us recall growing up in spiritual communities where science and faith were in partnership or in conversation with each other? Okay, look around so you can see if there are any hands. So what we're doing here is necessary and it's innovative in the sense that it's important to continue to have these conversations. And one critique that I always have is that we do a lot of stuff at the level of academia, and we don't always have the right tools to make that translate into local churches. And so I think it's important for us to continue to have these conversations, but figure out how to make these happen in our sacred spaces and with the people that we see day to day, with the people that we eat with, that we have communion with, because these are important conversations as you all covered earlier today on some of your panels. One of the greatest tragedies of our time is this impression that has been created that science and religion have to be at war. And that's Francis Collins. So I just want to sort of dispel some of the myths right now about how science and religion can or cannot work together. But the gift to our children, I think, from this particular conversation is that we can encourage our children not to live in binaries, right? So we've talked a little bit about it today about always good and evil, negative and positive. If you're going to be a scientist, you can't be a preacher. If you're going to do this thing, you can't make all those compartments sort of come together. And so what intersectionality and collaboration does, it gives our youth and our children space to free themselves to explore all these different pieces and how they can come together and work together. So last night was an amazing word from our speaker at Chapel. And she talked about one of the three things that Dr. Ware was talking about in terms of human identity, community, and purpose. And so I want to focus just a little bit on those three things as it relates to youth and children. So how do we as faith communities and scientists help children and youth to explore their identity, cultivate community, and identify their purpose? Want to look at STEM a little bit for a second, and we'll get to how that purpose and identity and community can come together and through that. So according to DCPS, which is DC Public Schools, STEM is integration in action, integrates science, technology, engineering, and math so that each of these content areas is taught within other content areas and equally alongside literacy and composition. So in the District of Columbia, there's low literacy levels in some wards. And so alongside teaching literacy and composition, they're using math and science as a way to sort of supplement and help bring up the literacy levels as well. So that's one example of how when you use creative measures, i.e. science or math, or making math and science fun, you also teach kids how to read, and you also help them learn sentence structure and syntax and all of those things. So here are some of the DCPS STEM partners and partner programs local in the area. It's called, one is called DC STEM Network, need.org. DCPS also works closely with the Department of Energy, Earth Echo, and Project Lead the Way. And so I have a link if anybody is interested here that I can give you for other STEM programs that are doing things with the public education community. Why is STEM an important conversation for faith communities and faith leaders? So at a very basic level, the District of Columbia has been noted as the third major city for STEM jobs in the nation after graduation. So here's a lucrative space, like the city that we're in, the area that we're connected to, is a lucrative space for job opportunities. So when we're thinking about youth and children and how they can excel, this is an area where children can do, and children and youth can go on to do great work and make an impact because those jobs are needed. The average wage for STEM jobs is $99,000 a year. So that's good money, and it's money too, so that means there's money to be made out there. And STEM jobs make up about 12% of the DC job market. So there's a need for children to go into these particular STEM fields. According to a 2009 report from the National Center for Education Statistics, African Americans receive 7% of all STEM bachelor's degrees, 4% of master's degrees, and 2% of PhDs. Now, I think there's been a bit of an increase. 2009 was about 6 years ago, so there's been just a slight increase, but it's still a disparity there. We'll talk about some more of that down the line. So I want to talk a little bit about, and if I'm going too fast, just let me know, but I know we're pressed for time. I want to talk a little bit about PARC, which is the way that children in DC are tested. So PARC is, I had my notes, it's such a long name. Does anybody remember what PARC, the acronym stands for? It's like Partnership Assessment for Readiness and of College Readiness. I'm so sorry I'm getting this wrong, but I had notes and it didn't work out between the Mac and the PC. But this is the way the children are being scored for college and career readiness. That's the CC. So I'm going to give you some percentages where by ethnicity our children are scoring in terms of readiness for college and career. So when we're talking about disparities, who is at the bottom? And look around this room. We're at Howard University, and 4% of our black school children are ready and prepared for college and career. And so, I mean, the results are right there for you. 8% at Hispanic special needs, 10%, and 52% for our white students. So as people of faith, when we see the reality of these statistics where our children are not prepared in terms of their math for college or career, 4%. And this is a test that was just taken this last school year. So it's not old results. This is very recent. What can we do as we talk about justice and making sure kids are safe and ready and prepared to be all that they can be? What can we do as faith leaders, and do we even care? Like as we're having these religious and science debates, do we care about how this impacts children or not, or the next generation that is coming up after us? And as people of color, because we're here at Howard University, how can we bridge the gap, particularly for our minority students? So here are the second results. For overall how they fared. So the previous statistics were just in the area of math. I just wanted to give you one example. But this is overall. So they have levels of 4, and at the top, level 1 is of course means you're overly prepared or exceeding preparedness. And so this is the results for that. And again, so you see white, special needs, and Hispanic sort of on the same plane, and our black students are falling behind. So I just challenge us to sit with that for a little bit, to think about as we are in churches or we have youth and children in our families, like how can we bridge the gap in terms of these disparities that are going on in the public educational system, particularly with our children of color and the access that they do or do not have. So there's no secret that in wards 7, 5, and 8, that all the resources are not always there that are necessary for our children to succeed. And that trauma and all these other factors are at play and working against our children of color, where they have social economic status, for example, compared to white children or black children. Like, these are still real issues that we don't want to sort of gloss over in understanding how race and social economic status play a huge role in this whole educational system. Is your hand coming up, Dr. Gilbert?
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No.
Hazel, but Brandon and I, we were discussing why are special needs children higher? Yeah, is it, are we considering kids who have autism?
So sure. The special needs category also has 3 categories within it. So it's social economic status, it's actual learning abilities, and there's one other category. Lonnie, do you know what it is? There's 3 categories within it. I just want to shout out my coworker, Lonnie is here with me today in support. So there's 3 categories within the special needs category. So it could be Black or Hispanic kids who are also social economically affected that are in this special needs category as well. To be helpful with some of the research. I know that may not fully answer your question, but that's part of it. So the question is, how can we be accountable? And so I sort of came up with some very generic ways that we can be accountable. So in academia, as professors and teachers, we need to be prepared for these students who will end up in some of our classrooms, or be aware that you may have students coming in their first year, for those of us who teach at the undergraduate level, who need catching up in English or literacy or basic math. So like, these are the students that we'll be introduced to if they even get accepted into college. But these are some of the barriers that exist, and being sensitive to those things. As a community, we must ensure that all children have access to proper resources to excel. This includes information sharing. So Reverend Daniel just talked about the programs that are going on. I'm sure there are tons of other programs, but making sure that parents are aware of all the programs and access resources that they need, get access to the resources that they need. This includes education. We need to know that our children are falling behind. So as faith leaders, if we have access to information that our constituents or parishioners may not have access to, making sure that we're sharing this and educating them on how they can bridge the gap on these opportunities. As a faith community, I'm just using one example of what we talked about, compassionate service, and continuing those tutoring programs, the Males of Color Initiative, Girls of Color things. So like, just making sure that there are programs and ways to bridge the gap. Advocacy is always critical. I didn't realize until I got into this current role how much legislators and policymakers actually want to hear the voice of faith leaders when it comes to what happens in their community. So be at those meetings for your church's neighborhood. And I'm not assuming that people are not, but these are important steps that we can take to ensure that we have the information about what's going on in terms of the policies that are being made within our local communities. Professional groups have all kinds of opportunities for outreach to bridge the gap. The National Black Professional Engineer Association, they do an outreach program every year here in the district. So there are tons of programs that professional groups are using as well to supplement. So have you all heard of high stakes testing? No? Okay. Have you heard of it? Okay. High stakes testing, it's not as strict as it was because they just created a new education law called ESSA to replace the No Child Left Behind Act. But during the No Child Left Behind Act, there were a lot of rigorous rules around the way we test our children. So high stake testing simply means that they have these tests that are extremely high. PARC is actually an example of that, one of the tests that I went over. to say whether or not if children can or cannot achieve at certain levels. So the tests are intentionally high stakes, and then there's several tests that go on throughout the year. So much so that there have been complaints about children being overexposed to testing so much that it interferes with regular curriculum. So it's just very, very, very much results driven in terms of percentages, and seeing that as a way to empower children to learn. But as No Child Left Behind Act has been overthrown as a result, because we see that it has not been working. So here are some other alternative ways that we can think about this. There's a book called Soar With Your Strengths by Donald O. Clifton and Paula Nelson, and it talks about the way the educational system focuses on children's deficits. So if they're not good at math, and we spend all this energy trying to get them up to speed on math, which is important, but we neglect the other areas where they're excelling at and don't continue to encourage them to excel in those areas. So it talks about rethinking and reimagining the way we cultivate the good things that our kids are doing. So instead of focusing on their deficits, it's soaring, continuing to soar in the areas that you're excelling in. Another thing we could do is modeling what it looks like to defy the labels and statistics. There are some of us who have defied labels, whether it's, Dr. Trulier, who has his own personal testimony and still has his PhD in his teaching, or if you know that you're from an urban neighborhood where odds were against you, being able to tell those stories and model that you can excel despite the statistics and the labels. Teaching with various learning styles in mind. So our children learn various ways, and I think it's up to teachers to be very sensitive to the ways in which their children are learning. If one child learns well via listening or audio, or another child needs to be hands-on, to be able to have those alternate ways of learning available in each classroom. And I think we also need to encourage creative outlets, so the arts and different languages, other social projects that don't always fall into the confines of reading, math, and literacy, the basic ways, or the main ways we try to teach children. This next slide apparently is not coming up at all, because this slide has, okay. So making STEM a reality. How can children see math and science in their everyday lives? One teacher says you ask them at the start of the year who loves math, and 2 people raise their hands. Getting them to see math in their everyday lives has helped them to make a better natural connection. Another quote from a teacher: many of us don't have to think about providing for ourselves or others, but students may be stealing to provide at home. It's the math and economic situation they are in, but it gets lost in the narrative of mathematics. So using the everyday lived realities of children to help them see how math and science is important in the way that they live each and every day. It's something as simple as you ride the bus or the metro, teaching them about engineering through trains and the bus rails. Like, these are everyday examples that kids see every day that we can sort of make those connectors and bridge the gap. Here are some ways we can take action. Again, Reverend Daniels sort of talked about some of these things, but you can take field trips to the Natural Sciences Museum. Identify children in your church or youth group who are interested in STEM-related subjects. You can do small group discussions on how math or science is played out in Scripture. Partner with schools to hold science fairs for students of color. Have positive conversations around scientific theories. Partner with local organizations such as Girls Inc. Girls Inc. works with an organization called Black Girls Code, where they teach young girls coding and computer programming. I think I highlighted this in green because I think it's important to create a culture of imagination and questioning for our youth, and give them the space to question and push back on the things that we tell them are right or wrong, or the way that they need to see the world, but give them the space to explore and question. You can also create a scholarship program specifically for children of color who study in STEM fields or who are interested in STEM fields, and you can look again into national professional organizations. at a very basic level, mentor a young person. How many of us know at least one niece, nephew, godchild, church person, or somebody that we can just take on under our wing and be their mentor? That doesn't mean you have to interact with them every day, but just check on them monthly or weekly or whatever your time allows for. Invest in the current children in your life. Not all of us are parents, but again, we could be godparents or aunties, but making sure that we're invested in them and giving them the resources and opportunities they need. You can sponsor a child on a STEM-related endeavor or commit to advocating for quality education in your respective local areas. These are some questions that I came up with that I would just like us to dialogue about. The role of science in religious education, and again, that means specifically Christian education. So the first question is, how can leaders of faith incorporate science in religious education? Is anybody in here a leader in a local church? And that doesn't mean you have to be the pastor, but okay. Based on what you heard today, have you gleaned any insights on how you can incorporate science in religious education? Can I have an example or some ideas that have been brewing in your head about these? Mm-hmm.
I like field trips. I'd love to be able to take some of the members to NASA or the Smithsonian and let them explore and let them see science up close.
Anybody else have some thoughts? Okay. So, I mean, either you're not sure or it's brewing and you don't want to say it. And if you're not sure, that's fine, because I think that is part of what this is trying to do, is trying to make us think about these ways and points of collaboration and intersection. But I just think these are questions that we should always keep in mind, because the STEM field is a booming field, and I'm using that term very loosely, but it's a popular field, but it's so much integrated into our everyday lives, so we can't live these sort of faith realities without understanding how these particular fields play into our everyday lives and affect the people that we connect with every day. Science and math are embedded in scripture. I just found a couple of scriptures where you can look at astronomy in Jeremiah 33 and 22. I'm assuming nobody has their Bible with them, but that's fine. But these were just some scriptures that I pulled out where you can look at disease being pathology or physics and optics when you're looking at light in these particular scriptures. So the opportunity is there, particularly when it comes to children of color or children and youth, where you can have a youth group and say, what sort of science do you see happening here? Or when we're talking about genealogy, that's math, count how many forefathers. I mean, so there are very basic examples where we're talking about Christian education and how we can implement science into those. If you will oblige me, I have a brief exercise about what it means to explore and the feeling you get when you give yourself the opportunity to explore. And I'm using this exercise for us because I think it's important for us to know how it feels when children get the opportunity to explore. So, when was the last time you've allowed your imagination to sort of run wild? And when it comes to your particular field or your areas of interest. So if somebody is interested in pursuing a particular, business endeavor or career, really, when was the last time you allowed yourself to just sit back and thought about all the possibility that lies within that particular thing that is in you to do? And I think when you do that, it gives you the opportunity to see the power of imagination and exploration. I think we limit ourselves sometimes being in academic spaces. Her exercise, Reverend Daniel's exercise, it was for pre-K, but it was just amazing to see all of us and hearing some of us talk and how we felt after doing a kiddie exercise, as if 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago we weren't kids. But it's important to put ourselves in the children and youth shoes to see how they will feel. So if you will oblige me just for a second, I want you to pick one area of your life. So it can be your relationship, it can be your church, it can be a business endeavor, or whatever it is. Pick that area of your life think about its current state, like what state it's in, what do you need to do with it, what do you want to do, and then close your eyes and imagine it thriving with no limitations. So 5 seconds, does everybody have the particular area? Okay, let's close our eyes, breathe, and imagine what it looks like with no limitations. Imagine it flourishing, growing, blossoming, impacting in whatever way your heart desires for it to be. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Does anyone feel like sharing what they imagine? Okay, Charles.
My sister came up with a program called Nature Awareness Adventures some time ago.
Nature Awareness
Nature
Adventures?
Awareness
Okay.
Adventures, essentially based on scouting without an organization around it, so something that children can do to create their own awareness. I'm thinking of where I'm working, which is in the prison system, to be able to turn it back to them through these other lessons that I'm doing to say, we understand that you are in a confined environment. Help me brainstorm of what can you do within those walls that keeps you aware of the world you're in. And to be able to take that dialogue coming from them who cannot go out, what can they see within their walls, the grass coming up, just watching the stars at night, the kinds of things that they can still connect to even though they're unable to go out in the world. And I think this is going to be an exciting thing that we can do.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share? Yes.
I just got introduced to a past friend who is a past church member to this hub that allows you to pull solar energy from a solar panel to a hub. And so the inventor, I met the inventor, we partnered with him, and we're trying to sell the product to DC Police Department one day next week. So when I was thinking, it's good for disasters happen that you can still charge your phones and have lights. So I was thinking this, we talked about DC Department, but when I was imagining, I have a great imagination, that we are selling this product throughout the United States. The police forces from Texas to Florida are calling us, needing more of these units for the police cars.
Nice, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought about, so I didn't give it deep thoughts.
That's fine.
But I thought about the ways in which, actually I didn't think about this in the city, the ways in which religion and arts, religion and science could intersect with the arts. What would this look like in theater?
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for obliging me. So, as we think about imagining things differently, that prophetic imagination that we all possess, I want to point out some disparities amongst STEM for adults, because as we encourage our children to explore, the same sort of barriers are already happening for adults, and particularly for Black and Latino women in this field of STEM. So there was a survey that was done they tested they surveyed white women, and they also surveyed Black and Latino women. And here are the results from the Black and Latino women. So Black and Latino women report regularly being mistaken as janitors at work. The stereotype that Asians are good at science helped Asian American women with their students, but not their colleagues. Asian American women said they felt more pressure to act feminine, demure, and passive, and receive more pushback when they don't. Latinos reported that when they assert themselves, they risk being seen as angry or too emotional. It's sort of the same lines for Black women. Latina scientists reported having a harder time getting administrative personnel to do work, and were expected to do more admin work by colleagues, such as filling out forms and organizing meetings. All of the women surveyed reported some form of gender bias, and 93% of white women have experienced gender bias as well. So I think it's important that as we're talking about religion and science, that it's important to remember or implement a womanist framework, one that honors people of color, but particularly women of color in these particular fields. Sitting here today, it was beautiful to hear all of us converse, but why is myself and Reverend Daniels the only women, and we're only talking about programmatic things as opposed to the academic dialogue? So I think it's important to remember that as we're doing this conversation, that we need to have women's voices, and particularly women of color's voices at the table. Because when we're talking about intersectionality, when we look at disease, I was reading some stuff that Dr. Ware was talking to, that Dr. Ware had sent me, and it was about how the Howard University Hospital is looking for pastoral care persons to come in and encourage the pastoral care patients to be a part of clinical trials. Like, so there's a need for people of color, when we talk about disease, to be at the table so that we'll know how to make medicine that affects our bodies and affects our bodies differently. So we just need to see more diversity at the table. This is a part of the study that, this quote is a part of the study that I was just reading. Williams, who has studied gender for more than 2 decades, said over the years she's received several requests to add a racial component to her studies. If you study gender, it's typically about white women, she said. If you study race, it's typically about men of color. Women of color get lost in the shuffle. What does this sound like? Black theology, when we needed womanist voices to come to the table and bring Black women's perspectives to the theological conversation. So the same applies when we continue to innovate in terms of who religious fields are in communication with, that we always remember the voices of color and gender. So one of my last slides talks about ethics and science, and just some general points of collaboration. So issues within the STEM field. Here are examples where STEM fields can use ethical counsel. Technology and robotics. So there's a lot of innovation going around in robotics, making new kinds of humans and making robotics being able to do all these interesting things that very much mirror what humans do, but there needs to be ethics in terms of the boundaries of that. So we need the humanities and religious voice in that. We also need religious voice in terms of stem cell research. And as we continue to do race, theories and things within science, we need a religious voice in that. And of course, as I just mentioned, gender equity. Issues within religion and ethics that need a scientific voice. When we look at sexuality and all of these barriers around gender and gender performance, we need science to help us understand the ways in which our own religious bias can be barriers in terms of sexuality and gender performance. Environmental justice, of course, when we talk about eco-justice, we need our science partners to be in conversation with us, as well again as race and disease, as I just mentioned. So the goal at the end of the day is to encourage our young people to be all that they can be and expand their possibilities for life, whether that be STEM, religion, or whatever fields they want to go to, but to ensure that they have the proper resources they need. I'm not sure what time it is, but I think I'm done with my time.